Imagine standing on an ancient battlefield. The air smells like iron and dust. Your shield is heavy. Your hands are shaking, even if you don't want them to be. You're watching the enemy line. Roman soldiers, perfectly still. Silent. Then something moves. Not a man. Not a horse. Something lower to the ground. Faster. Closer. A deep growl cuts through the noise, and suddenly, they release them. Massive dogs surge forward, armor strapped to their bodies, metal spikes flashing in the light. In that moment, your training disappears. Your courage hesitates, because Rome didn't just fight with steel. Rome fought with fear. And sometimes, that fear had teeth. The Roman Empire is remembered for discipline. Legions that moved like machines. Soldiers who trained endlessly. Formations so precise they're still studied today. But Rome understood something deeper than discipline. They understood psychology. They knew that before you defeat an enemy's body, you must first break their mind. And for that, steel alone was not always enough. Long before modern warfare studied fear as a weapon, the Romans were already experimenting with it. They used sound. They used intimidation. They used overwhelming presence. And in some cases, they used animals. Most people know about Roman horses, cavalry units, messengers, supply movement. But far fewer people know about Rome's most unsettling battlefield companion. The war dog. The Romans called them canes pugnaces. Fighting dogs. These were not pets, not mascots, not symbols. They were trained instruments of chaos. These dogs were chosen carefully. Rome did not grab animals at random. They selected large, powerful breeds ancestors of modern mastiffs and Molossian dogs. Broad chests, thick necks, strong jaws. Dogs that could knock a man off his feet, but size alone was not enough. Temperament mattered. Only the most aggressive, fearless animals were kept for combat training. Others were reassigned to guarding camps or patrolling borders. This was selection. Systematic. Deliberate. Roman war dogs were raised differently from birth. Handled by specialized trainers. Exposed early to noise, crowds, and violence. They learned not to panic. They learned to charge. The purpose of these dogs was not always to kill. That's the part modern audiences often misunderstand. Their primary role was disruption. A charging dog breaks formation. A broken formation breaks discipline. And once discipline is gone, the battle is already half lost. Roman commanders understood this perfectly. Before infantry clashed, dogs could be released into enemy ranks. They attacked legs. They pulled men down. They forced soldiers to drop shields and weapons. And even if the dogs were stopped, the damage was done. Fear spreads faster than blood. Some war dogs wore armor. Leather protection across the chest. Metal collars fitted with spikes. Not decorative. Functional. If an enemy tried to grab the dog, the spikes tore flesh. If a blade struck, the leather absorbed part of the blow. These dogs were not thrown away carelessly. They were investments, valuable ones, and Rome protected its investments. Ancient writers recorded how enemies reacted, not with strategy, with terror. A soldier can rationalize another soldier. You know what he wants. You know how he fights. But an animal trained only to attack, that triggers something primal, fear without logic. And Rome exploited that instinct mercilessly. War dogs were not used only in open battles. They were also guardians. Roman military camps were temporary cities. Thousands of men. Supplies. Weapons. At night, silence was dangerous. Dogs were stationed around the perimeter. They could smell intruders before guards could see them. They could hear movement long before footsteps reached human ears. A surprise attack at night often failed before it began, because the dogs reacted first. Here is something important. These dogs were not wild. They were controlled. Handlers worked closely with them. Commands were taught through repetition. Trust was built through routine. This relationship mattered. A poorly trained dog was dangerous to everyone. A well-trained one was precise. Some historical accounts suggest that certain dogs were recognized after battles. Not celebrated like soldiers, but respected, fed, well, protected, cared for. Rome understood loyalty, and dogs returned it without question. Other civilizations noticed. Greek writers mentioned Roman war dogs with discomfort. Later European armies experimented with similar ideas, but no one integrated animals into warfare with Rome's level of structure. Because Rome did not improvise, they engineered. Every tool had a role, every weapon had a purpose, and every fear was calculated. As time passed, warfare began to change. Armor improved, weapons evolved, formations adapted. War dogs became less effective on open battlefields, but Rome did not abandon them completely. They shifted roles: border patrol, fort defense, urban security. The battlefield changed. The idea survived. What matters is not how long Rome used war dogs. What matters is why they used them. Rome understood something timeless, that war is not just about strength. It is about shock, disruption, breaking certainty. And sometimes, the most terrifying weapon is not forged. It is trained, and it breathed. That realization is where this story truly deepens. By the time Roman war dogs were fully integrated into the empire's military system, Rome had already learned something most civilizations would discover much later. Winning a battle was not only about killing the enemy, it was about controlling what the enemy felt. Fear, uncertainty, loss of control, and few things shattered control faster than an animal trained to attack without hesitation. In Part Uno, we saw how Roman war dogs were used to break formations and guard camps. But that was only the beginning, because Rome did not stop at the battlefield. They turned fear into a system. Roman commanders understood something subtle. A weapon does not need to kill to be effective. It only needs to force mistakes. War dogs forced mistakes constantly. Enemies raised shields too early, turned their backs, broke ranks to escape something they could not reason with. And once order was broken, Roman infantry moved in. Clean, efficient, relentless. The dogs were rarely the final blow. They were the opening crack. As Rome expanded, so did the reputation of its war dogs. Stories traveled ahead of the legions. Villages whispered about them. Enemy soldiers warned each other. By the time a Roman army arrived, fear often arrived first. Some opponents reportedly panicked at the mere sound of barking echoing through valleys or forests. Rome weaponized anticipation. But fear is a double-edged sword. The same chaos Rome inflicted on others could become dangerous if mismanaged. War dogs required discipline. A frightened or injured dog could turn unpredictable. A poorly handled release could disrupt Roman troops as much as the enemy. So Rome refined training even further. Handlers were selected carefully, often veterans who understood battle stress. Men who could stay calm while chaos unfolded. Dogs were trained to recognize Roman armor, Roman commands, Roman scents. This prevented friendly casualties. Mostly, no system is perfect. As centuries passed, Roman warfare began to evolve. Armor improved. Enemy tactics adapted. Fortifications became more complex. Heavy infantry engagements shifted. Sieges became more common than open field battles. And war dogs, while terrifying, had limitations. They could not climb walls. They could not breach gates. They could not withstand dense spear formations. Slowly, their role began to change. They were still used but differently. Dogs became more prominent in defensive roles. Fortresses, border regions, remote outposts. They guarded supply depots, detected ambushes, alerted soldiers to nighttime threats. In these roles, they were unmatched. Technology could not replace smell or instinct. Rome understood that. But there was another change happening, one that had nothing to do with dogs. The empire itself was changing. Rome grew too large. Command became fragmented. Supply lines stretched thin. Political instability crept in. When discipline weakened at the top, it weakened everywhere, including the handling of war dogs. Training standards dropped in some regions. Resources were diverted. Handlers became less experienced. And when systems weaken, specialized tools suffer first. By the late Empire, war dogs were no longer a defining symbol of Roman dominance. They still existed, but quietly, overshadowed by political chaos, invasions, and internal decay. When Rome finally fractured, much of its military knowledge was lost or scattered, and the war dogs faded with it, not because they were ineffective, but because the system that controlled them collapsed. History moved on. Centuries passed, but the idea Rome pioneered did not disappear. It slept, until humans needed it again. Modern militaries rediscovered what Rome had known. Animals perceive the world differently. They sense danger faster. They react without hesitation. Military dogs return not to charge battlefields, but to serve in new ways. Bomb detection, search and rescue, perimeter security. Different roles, same principle. Fear, awareness, control. The Roman war dog was not a primitive experiment. It was an early understanding of psychological warfare. That war is not only about weapons, it is about perception. Rome mastered that, and while empires rise and fall, ideas survive. The dogs are different now. The armor is gone. The collars no longer carry spikes, but the principle remains. Use instinct. Use fear. Use control. When we look back at Roman war dogs, it is easy to see brutality. And it was brutal, but it was also calculated. Rome did not invent violence. They refined it. They understood that the most powerful weapons are not always made of metal. Sometimes they breathe, they feel, they obey. And when controlled by a disciplined system, they become something far more dangerous than a blade. They become fear itself. That is the true legacy of the Roman war dog. Not the animal, but the idea behind it. And that is where this story ends.